For more than 2 centuries, the Rothschild name has been associated with wealth, influence, and power. It appears again and again in the history of European finance, war, and state building. To some, the Rothschilds were extraordinary bankers, innovators who helped governments survive in a dangerous and unstable world. To others, the name has taken on a far darker meaning, becoming shorthand for hidden control, secret coordination, and unseen forces operating behind the events of history. But between legend and reality lies a quieter, far more revealing question. Welcome to the Economic Archives. In this episode, we're asking a simple question. Do the Rothschilds still hold power today? To understand why this question persists, we need to return to Europe at the end of the 18th century. This was a continent defined by instability. Wars were frequent and expensive. Borders shifted constantly. Governments were almost permanently short of money. Moving funds across long distances was slow, risky, and unreliable. Power did not rest solely in armies or crowns, but in the ability to finance them. States relied heavily on private financiers, but trust was fragile. Information traveled slowly. A loan issued in one city could collapse in value before news reached another. Finance was local, fragmented, and uncertain. Reputation mattered more than regulation. Failure was common, and confidence could vanish overnight. This was the world Mayor Amschel Rothschild was born into, in Frankfurt's Judengasse. He did not invent banking, nor was he the only financier of his time. What he understood, however, was something many rulers underestimated. Wealth alone was not power. Power came from coordination, from being able to move money, credit, and information faster and more reliably than others. Mayor Amschel's most important decision was not a single trade or loan, but a strategy. He sent his 5 sons to Europe's major financial centers: London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, and Frankfurt. Each son operated locally but remained tied to the others through constant correspondence, shared incentives, and absolute family trust. What emerged was a private network that spanned the continent. At a time when governments struggled to communicate efficiently, the Rothschilds could exchange information with remarkable speed. Letters traveled faster than official channels. News about wars, treaties, and markets reached them before rivals. Trust stayed internal. Decisions could be coordinated across borders without waiting for state approval. This did not give the family control over Europe, but it gave them a decisive advantage. The family's influence came primarily through government finance, especially bonds. In the 19th century, lending to states was dangerous. Governments defaulted. Regimes collapsed. Wars wiped out treasuries overnight. Many lenders avoided this risk entirely. The Rothschilds did not, though they managed it carefully. They underwrote government bonds, distributed them to investors, and supported their value during periods of uncertainty. In doing so, they provided governments with something desperately needed: credibility. A bond associated with the Rothschild name reassured investors that experienced financiers stood behind it. This reduced borrowing costs and stabilized markets. In return, the family gained profit, access, and influence. Ministers listened to them. Rulers consulted them. Their opinions carried weight in financial decisions. But this is where precision matters. Influence is not the same as control. The Rothschilds did not command governments. They negotiated with them. They competed with other banks. They sometimes lost contracts. States borrowed from them because it worked, not because they were forced to. When better terms appeared elsewhere, governments took them. Even at their peak, Rothschild power had clear limits. They could not prevent wars from breaking out. They could not dictate political outcomes. They could not stop governments from defaulting when regimes collapsed. Their influence depended on alignment with state interests, and it weakened when politics became unstable or unpredictable. So why did their reputation grow so large? Part of the answer lies in visibility. The Rothschild name appeared repeatedly at moments of crisis: wars, bailouts, state loans, and financial emergencies. Another part lies in misunderstanding. Financial power is abstract. It does not look like armies, flags, or laws. It operates through contracts, confidence, and perception. To those outside the system, this kind of power feels invisible, and invisibility invites suspicion. Over time, exaggeration took hold. Stories circulated claiming the family controlled wars, manipulated economies, or ruled governments from behind the scenes. Many of these narratives blended fear, envy, and anti-Semitism, particularly during periods of social and economic stress. Crucially, they did not require evidence to persist. Complexity was replaced with conspiracy. As the 19th century progressed, the Rothschild myth grew alongside their real success. The more visible the family became, the easier it was for observers to assume hidden motives. The idea of a private family influencing governments unsettled people who were accustomed to power being embodied in monarchs or parliaments. But history did not stop in the 19th century. As the world entered the 20th century, finance began to change fundamentally. Capital markets expanded. Corporations replaced family banks as dominant economic actors. Governments established central banks and formalized monetary policy. Regulation increased, particularly after crises exposed systemic weaknesses. Public debt markets became institutional rather than personal. The very system the Rothschilds helped build began to reduce the power of any single family. This is one of the great ironies of their story. The Rothschilds were so successful at shaping modern finance that modern finance eventually outgrew them. Yet the myth did not fade. In many ways, it intensified. Why? Because modern power became even harder to see. Today, global finance is vast, complex, and impersonal. Decisions are shaped by regulations, committees, multinational institutions, and algorithms. Financial crises occur without obvious villains. Markets move faster than governments can respond. For many people, the system feels distant, opaque, and unaccountable. When people struggle to understand how power operates, they search for symbols. Symbols are easier to grasp than systems. They reduce complexity into narratives. And the Rothschilds, because of their longevity and historical visibility, became one of those symbols. This is why modern claims about Rothschild power often collapse timelines. 19th century banking practices are projected onto 21st century finance. A family network built on handwritten letters is imagined as a global command structure operating in real time. The past is treated as if it never ended. But it did end, slowly, structurally, and decisively. As industrial economies expanded, capital requirements grew beyond what even the largest family banks could supply. Railways, steel, energy, and global trade demanded levels of financing that required public markets, joint stock companies, and institutional investors. This diluted family dominance. Where Rothschild influence once came from coordination and trust within a small network, modern finance relies on scale, transparency, and regulation. Power became procedural rather than personal. It moved from drawing rooms into boardrooms and then into bureaucracies. The First World War accelerated this shift. Governments expanded their role in economic management. National debt exploded. Central banks gained authority. Financial systems became tools of state policy rather than private negotiation. After the Second World War, this trend only deepened. By the late 20th century, finance had become global, regulated, and institutionalized. Influence existed, but it was dispersed. It flowed through banks, funds, corporations, and states, not families. The Rothschild family did not disappear. Rothschild-linked institutions still exist today. There are investment banks, advisory firms, wealth management businesses, philanthropic foundations, vineyards, and private holdings associated with the name. Members of the family remain wealthy and well-connected. But this is not 19th century power. Modern financial influence is constrained. It operates within legal frameworks, competitive markets, and public scrutiny. No private family coordinates global finance. No surname controls currencies. No lineage directs governments. So, when people ask whether the Rothschilds still hold power, the answer depends entirely on what they mean by power. Do they have wealth? Yes, though it is fragmented, private, and difficult to measure. Do they have influence? In certain financial, cultural, and philanthropic circles, yes. Do they control governments, markets, or global events? There is no credible evidence to support that claim. What remains most powerful today is not the family itself, but the idea of the family. The Rothschilds have become a symbol, a shorthand for elite finance, distant systems, and power that feels beyond public control. Symbols endure far longer than balance sheets. They survive because they simplify a world that feels overwhelming. In the end, the story of the Rothschilds is not one of secret rulers guiding the modern world. It is a story about how power once concentrated, how it evolved, and how it became embedded in systems rather than surnames. The Rothschilds helped shape the financial world we live in, but the world they helped build no longer needs them to run it. And that distinction between influence and control, between legacy and power, is the key to understanding why the myth survives and why the reality is far more ordinary than some are made to believe.